The New York Times today standing by its story that Musk was going to get a China briefing, saying the meeting changed when the story leaked. Musk denied the report. They said the meeting was going to be about Doge. Joining me now is former CIA military analyst and former spokesperson for the Counter-Extremism Project, Tara Maller. And back with me, Semaphore White House correspondent Shelby Talcott. So, Tara, thank you for joining us as well. We have President Trump insisting that Musk's Pentagon visit was focused on cost-cutting at the department. The Times is standing by its reporting that Musk was set to meet with the acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs as well as the head of the Indo-Pacific Command to discuss China. Nonetheless, the half-hour meeting yesterday still gave unprecedented access to a defense contractor with extensive business interests in China. What are your thoughts on Musk's involvement in the administration and his potential access to U.S. secrets?
My thoughts here would be the same as my thoughts would be for any individual, any business leader, or any government official. When you're going to have access to classified information of any particular level, there are two things that matter. Do you have the necessary clearance that you have gone through in order to have access to that information? And you have the need to know what is the compelling reason, either your position, the portfolio you're dealing with, even within the CIA. If you're working on one country, you can't see all the intelligence related to another country unrelated to your job. So my two questions here, and the White House hasn't been clear on this. What is Musk's actual clearance level? They said he has a clearance. My understanding is it's not the highest TSSCI because I don't believe he's gone through that whole process. And then secondly, what is the need to know here? He's not in a national security role. He's not in a Senate confirmed ambassador post where he would need that information. He's not in an official role at State Department or in the intelligence community. So those would be my two questions, which would hold true not just for Elon Musk, but for any individual. And that is the standard that anyone at the Pentagon or any agency should use, because having a clearance, not having a clearance allows you different access to different types of information.
Right. And you did mention the prospect of classified information. The White House has said that it was a non-classified briefing. Is that what she got? I just want to make sure we're clear on that. But Shelby, the Times reports the Musk meeting on China was canceled after its published report. And Secretary Hegseth said they did not discuss Chinese war plans when they met, but they did not say whether they talked about China perhaps more generally. What have you heard from inside the White House? And what do you make of the president's assertion that he would not give access to sensitive information to an advisor with conflicts of interest?
We really, quite frankly, have not heard a lot about this meeting. We know that Elon Musk was in the Pentagon for about an hour and a half on Friday afternoon. He exited when reporters were there with Pete Hegseth. He sort of said that he's been there before, but nobody offered up any details beyond that. Elon Musk is a very unique figure within the administration for many reasons, and there has been ongoing concerns about these security clearances when it comes to Elon Musk. And the White House hasn't been entirely clear, aside to say, as in this case, that he was not accessing classified information, and they have always insisted that he has gone by the books. But we don't know a lot about his exact role and what he is involved with when it comes to even his efforts to cut government funding and cut government waste. The administration, the transparency isn't 100% there.
Yeah. And last night, Tara, Trump rescinded those security clearances and access to classified information for a slate of his political opponents. That includes Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, Liz Cheney. Trump's memo reads like something of an enemies list. Is this move mostly symbolic? I mean, I'm curious the consequences of these individuals losing security clearances.
Sure. On the one hand, the president does have the right and the power and the authority to do this. On the other hand, we shouldn't be revoking clearances and granting clearances based on political litmus tests or loyalty tests. When I worked in government, when many people work in government, especially in the civil service, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, in most offices, there are both. And that shouldn't be the requirement for a security clearance. It's whether or not you, again, have the need to know the information and have gone through the rigorous clearance process. In this case, actually stripping these individuals of their clearance, if they're ever to go back into government, it's going to cost the government more to re-clear them. Also, if it's to the president's advantage. In a usual circumstance, it's to the president's advantage to allow people from previous administrations to hold their clearance so that the president, if need be, in a security or national security crisis, in dealing with a foreign leader, can tap that experience, can share materials. So, for example, prior presidents want to be able to talk to prior secretaries of state, prior presidents about
consult with them.
Previous things. Exactly.
Yeah,
and that this inhibits the ability to do that.
Tara, I also want to get your thoughts on the administration cutting off federal funding for the U.S. Agency for Global Media. That's the big umbrella organization that supports Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia, and other outlets. And these networks have reported accurate and unbiased news in some of the world's most restrictive media environments for over 80 years. The White House claims, without evidence, that VOA spreads radical propaganda. Why does Trump regard this platform as a political enemy, and why shut down organizations that will likely hurt America's standing in the world?
This is extraordinarily disheartening. As you noted, Voice of America has been broadcasting since 1942. The first original broadcast I went to the website to check was out of New York into Germany. It was to help counter Nazi propaganda. It was used throughout the Cold War. It was used by Republican presidents and Democrats alike. Reagan made speeches via Voice of America translated into languages. It's sort of the way that America can communicate its voice on issues critical to America and its values around the world. In hundreds of millions of people tune into it on all sorts of platforms. And I frankly think even if they felt there needed to be reforms or changes or modernize Voice of America, they're losing a critical tool in our toolbox of soft power. While I understand America's power rests on our military and economic prowess, it also rests on our voice and our ability to project that voice globally in a multitude of languages. And we just frankly cut off our ability to do that, much like we did at the department which handles foreign aid. We've cut off a lot of our forms of softer influence, which I should note, we call them soft power, but they really do help America maintain its national security and our economic interests too, by creating a buffer against adversarial nations in a lot of places around the world.
All right, Tara Maller and Shelby Talcott, ladies, thank you both so much.